They say some nights never end, that no matter how far you walk from them, how many years you stack between now and then, you still wake up in a cold sweat, breath shallow, heart pounding as if it just happened. That night for me was June 3rd, 1963. It was the night my sister vanished, and the night my cousin did something to me I wouldn't understand, let alone speak of, for more than 5 decades. My name is Deborah Allen. I'm 73 years old, and I live in Natchez, Mississippi, in the same creaky white cottage where I was born. The windows rattle when it storms. The porch sags a little under my rocking chair. But this house, this place, it's full of ghosts. Not all of them unwelcome. I wasn't always this old woman with silver hair and trembling hands. Once, I was just a girl, barefoot, brown-eyed, with a laugh that could echo through the pine trees and make the birds pause. My big sister Elaine used to say my laugh was too loud for a lady, but she always smiled when she said it. Elaine was my best friend. She was 17 when she disappeared. I was just 10. We shared a room, a bed, and all our secrets except the last one. The one I never got to tell her. The one that has sat in my throat like a splinter for 63 years. People in town still whisper about Elaine. She was the pretty one, the smart one, the girl who had a future. They said she must have run off with a boy or caught a bus to Memphis, but I knew better. You don't run away without your shoes. You don't run away in silence. And you sure don't leave your baby sister asleep on the floor with the cousin who always stared too long. Back then, folks didn't ask too many questions, not in families like ours, not when the pain stayed tucked behind closed doors and church smiles. Uncle Raymond was the sheriff's drinking buddy. Aunt Jeannie played piano at revival. And our cousin Troy, he was 17 like Elaine, strong as a mule, sweet-talking when he wanted something. I used to think Troy was funny. He'd lift me into the hayloft and let me braid his hair when nobody was looking. But something changed in him the year Elaine turned 16. His eyes got darker. His laughter had edges. And on the night Elaine vanished, he waited until Mama and Daddy went out searching with flashlights and dogs. He waited until I was alone. I won't tell that part yet. Not here. Not now. You need to know who I was before all that. I was born in 1950, the youngest of 3. Elaine was my heart. My brother Vernon died in 58 rattlesnake bite out by the barn. That left just the 2 of us girls. Daddy was a quiet man, worked the mill. Mama was too proud for her own good, always saying things like, "We handle our mess inside our house. You hear me?" I heard her. We all did. By 10. I already knew the rules. Don't cry in front of Daddy. Don't sass Mama when she's tired. Don't ask where Troy disappears to at night. And never, ever go near the shed behind Grandma Ruth's old garden. Elaine used to protect me from all of it. She'd sit with me when I had nightmares, press a cool rag to my forehead when I was sick, sneak me extra cornbread under the table. But that last year, something was heavy on her. I saw it in her eyes. I saw it in the way she jumped when Troy walked into the room. She wanted to tell me. I believe that with all my heart. She just didn't get the chance. So now, after 73 years of holding this story in my bones, I've decided to speak it out loud, not for vengeance, not for pity, but because silence is where monsters grow. And I've lived in that silence long enough. This is my story. This is Elaine's story. And this is the truth about what happened the night my sister disappeared. My earliest memories weren't grand or dramatic. They were simple, warm, worn down by time, like the smoothed edges of a river stone. I remember the scratch of cotton sheets dried in the Mississippi sun, the smell of cornbread and cane syrup in the morning, and Elaine's voice humming old gospel tunes while she brushed my hair. Elaine was 7 years older than me. I followed her everywhere, like a shadow made of freckles and curiosity. She never seemed to mind. We shared a small attic bedroom with a sloped ceiling and a single window that let in the moonlight just right. On summer nights, we'd whisper under the covers, long after Mama said lights out, telling each other stories about the kind of women we'd grow up to be. "I'm going to be a nurse," Elaine once said, twirling a lock of her auburn hair around her finger. "Maybe move up to Nashville or even Chicago." I told her I wanted to stay in Natchez forever. She laughed, then soft and sad. "You'll change your mind, Debbie. Everybody does." She always called me Debbie. No one else did. Back then, before everything darkened, our world felt small but safe. Daddy worked long hours at the paper mill and came home with a face caked in ash. He rarely raised his voice, but he rarely smiled either. Mama was a stern woman, God-fearing, reputation-obsessed, and quick with the back of her hand, but she kept a clean house and never let us go hungry. Our family was like many others in Natchez during the 50s, proud, private, and stitched together by duty more than affection. Still, Elaine and I carved out joy where we could. We played hopscotch on the dusty back road, caught fireflies in mason jars, and snuck penny candies from Mr. Finch's corner store. She was my hero, my protector, my only true friend. Looking back now, I think she tried to shield me from more than just scraped knees and bad dreams. She'd keep me busy when Uncle Raymond came by unannounced. She'd tighten her jaw every time Troy looked at her too long. She'd stand between me and Mama when the air got thick with tension. Elaine carried the weight of things she never spoke about. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. It was the summer before she vanished. The heat was unbearable, the kind that made the window glass sweat. We were sitting on the front steps with our feet in the dirt, drinking sweet tea, when Troy pulled up in his beat-up truck. He was 17, like Elaine, lanky and loud, always wearing that smug grin like he knew secrets no one else did. I didn't understand it then, but something in her shifted when he got out. He walked up with 2 Coca-Colas and a smirk. For my favorite cousins, Elaine took one with a tight smile. I noticed her hand trembled slightly. "Thanks," she said, her voice flat. We were just heading inside. Troy didn't move. He looked at me and winked. "How's my little Debbie doing?" I didn't answer. I was staring at Elaine. Her face had gone pale. Later that night, I asked her why she didn't like Troy. She hesitated, then pulled me close and whispered, "Sometimes, the ones who smile the most are the ones you need to run from." I didn't understand then, but I do now. Elaine started changing that summer. She got quieter. She stopped humming while brushing her hair. Her school books sat untouched, and she began locking our bedroom door at night. Mama scolded her for being moody. Daddy just kept working and pretending not to notice. But I noticed. One night, I woke up to find Elaine crying into her pillow. I crawled into bed beside her and wrapped my arms around her the way she used to do for me. "Did someone hurt you?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just held me tighter. There were moments when I almost told Mama, times I thought about asking Daddy why Troy always came around when no one else was home. But the fear in Elaine's eyes stopped me every time. It was like she knew that speaking the truth would only bring more pain. Then came the night she disappeared, June 3rd, 1963. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way until it wasn't. Elaine made us dinner macaroni and fried tomatoes. Mama and Daddy had gone to a church committee meeting. Troy had come by earlier, but left after a few minutes, saying he had somewhere to be. Elaine seemed restless, pacing the kitchen, checking the front door lock 3 times before bed. She hugged me longer than usual. "I love you," she whispered into my hair. "I love you too. I need you to remember that. Debbie." I nodded, confused, but didn't press her. That was the last time I saw her. I woke up the next morning to an empty bed. No sign of her clothes, no note, no goodbye. At first, they thought she ran off. Then the search parties started, flashlights in the woods, dogs sniffing her pillow, police asking questions Mama refused to answer. But I knew better. I knew my sister. She didn't run away. She was taken. And the worst part, the very next night, while Mama cried into Daddy's chest and the house reeked of sorrow, Troy came back, and that's when my nightmare truly began. I remember how quiet the house felt the night after Elaine went missing. Too quiet. Even the cicadas outside seemed to hush, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Mama had finally cried herself to sleep in her rocking chair, and Daddy sat stiffly on the porch, puffing his pipe and staring into the trees like he expected Elaine to emerge from them, barefoot and smiling, saying it was all just a joke. But deep down, I think we all knew she wasn't coming back. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, hugging Elaine's pillow tight, breathing in what was left of her scent, lavender soap and pencil shavings. Her side of the bed was still neatly made. She hadn't taken a single thing, not her shoes, not her lucky blue ribbon. Not even the dime Daddy gave her for emergencies, which she always kept hidden in her shoe. And that's how I knew something was terribly wrong. The knock came just past 10 p.m. 3 short taps. I froze. Daddy didn't stir from the porch. Mama snored softly, her head tilted back. I crept to the front window and peeked through the lace curtain. It was Troy. He stood on the porch, holding a brown paper bag. I remember how he looked sweaty, twitchy, with that crooked smile that never reached his eyes. I opened the door, just a crack. "What do you want?" I asked. His eyes scanned me up and down. "Brought y'all dinner. Fried chicken and biscuits from Tully's. Thought you might not have eaten." I blinked. "It's too late." Troy pushed the door wider with his boot and stepped in like he owned the place. "You shouldn't be alone," he muttered, "with Elaine gone and all. I figured you could use some company." I wanted to scream, to run, but I was 10. And he was taller, older, stronger. I backed away slowly as he dropped the bag on the table and shut the door behind him. The air in the house changed, became thick, like syrup. I could barely breathe. He walked past Mama, who didn't stir, and looked back at me with a glint in his eye. "I'll check on your daddy," he said softly, then veered toward the porch. I stayed rooted in place until I heard him laughing with Daddy outside, like everything was normal, like my sister wasn't missing, like he hadn't made my skin crawl since the day I turned 8. I retreated into the kitchen and tried to steady my breath. About an hour later, after Daddy had gone inside to lie down and the house settled into uneasy quiet again, Troy knocked on our bedroom door. I'd locked it. Elaine taught me to always lock it if we were home alone or if Troy was nearby. He jiggled the knob. "Debbie," he said, his voice muffled. "You all right in there?" I didn't answer. The knob shook harder. "I just want to talk. I miss her too. Still." I said nothing. Then the soft knock turned into a hard bang. "I know you're in there." I grabbed the blanket and crawled into the corner behind the bed. trying to make myself disappear. Eventually, the knocking stopped, but I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the door until dawn. The next day, Mama acted like nothing had happened. She made grits and eggs, humming under her breath. Daddy sat silently at the table, eyes bloodshot. Elaine's name wasn't spoken once. And Troy, he came by again that evening, and the next, and the next. Each time, he stayed longer. Each time, I locked the door. But on the 5th night, I made a mistake. I forgot. I was brushing my hair and thinking of Elaine when I heard the doorknob turn, and this time, it opened. Troy stepped in, closing it quietly behind him. He moved slowly, like a snake coiling around its prey. "You miss her, don't you?" he asked. I stood frozen, brush still in my hand. He stepped closer. "Don't cry. Debbie, you're prettier when you smile." I don't remember everything after that. My mind shut off. It was as if I left my body and watched it all from the ceiling. When it was over, he whispered, "Don't tell nobody. You'll break your mama's heart." Then he left, as if nothing had happened. And I sat there, my body aching, my soul shattered, blood drying on my thighs, staring at the window where the moonlight used to comfort me. Elaine's side of the bed was still made, and I knew then she hadn't run away. She'd tried to escape. And maybe, just maybe, he caught her before she could. That was the beginning of the longest, darkest season of my life. And no one, not Mama, not Daddy, not the neighbors ever asked me if I was okay. Because girls like me weren't asked questions. We were expected to endure, to be quiet, to survive. And so, I did. But I never forgot. And I never stopped listening for my sister's voice in the wind. Because somewhere deep down, I still hoped she'd come back and save me, just like she always had. I used to think time would dull the edges of what happened that night. That maybe, if I was quiet enough, if I didn't cry too loud or breathe too deep, the pain would learn to hush alongside me. But silence, I learned, doesn't make a wound vanish. It just buries it. After that first night, Troy didn't stop. He came and went like a storm I could never predict, sometimes gentle in voice, sometimes cruel with his hands, but always unwanted, always feared. I tried to tell Mama once, just once. It was a Sunday morning. I was 11. We'd just come home from church, and Mama was humming in the kitchen, still in her floral dress. Her hands were busy folding napkins when I walked in. "Mama," I said, my voice shaking. She didn't look up. I think Troy's bad." That was all I could manage. She stopped folding, finally looked at me. "What do you mean?" she asked. Not angry, not warm, just cautious. I stared at the floor. He touches me. There was a pause, a long one, long enough to hear the faucet dripping, the ticking of the wall clock, my heart pounding in my ears. Then she went back to folding. "You're too old for childish lies. Deborah," her voice was cold, dismissive. "He's family. And you'll keep your mouth shut unless you want to break this house apart." I wanted to scream, to throw every dish in that kitchen. But I didn't. I just stood there until she left the room. She never mentioned it again. Neither did I. From that day forward, I understood no one was going to save me. Elaine was gone. Mama had turned her back. Daddy had buried himself in work and bourbon. And Troy, he became bolder, more twisted, as if Mama's silence had given him permission. The abuse continued through my teenage years. He'd corner me in the barn, in the pantry, once, even in church during a community potluck. I learned how to lock doors faster, how to shrink into corners, how to make myself invisible. I stopped laughing. I stopped trusting. School became my only refuge, but even that was fleeting. By 16, Mama insisted I drop out to help around the house. No daughter of mine needs college to be a good wife, she said. Good wife. The phrase made bile rise in my throat. I watched other girls my age plan dances, dream of boys and wedding dresses, while I counted the days between Troy's visits like a prisoner counting the scratch marks on a cell wall. And then, as if fate hadn't been cruel enough, Mama let him move in. He's fallen on hard times, she explained, stirring beans at the stove, just till he gets back on his feet. He moved into the guest room, which meant I stopped sleeping altogether. By then, I was 18, legally grown, but with no money, no diploma, and nowhere to go. I tried applying to a textile mill in town, but Troy convinced Mama to say no. She's better off at home, he whispered. Always so helpful. Helpful like a noose. Helpful like poison. I began to wonder if Elaine had told Mama something too. If maybe she had once whispered the same words I had. And Mama made the same choice, to ignore it, to silence it, to protect him. Some nights, I'd curl up in the closet with a flashlight and a photograph of Elaine. It was the last picture we ever took together at the county fair. She was holding a candy apple, laughing. I looked up to her in that moment like she hung the moon. I still do. She was the only light I ever had, my only anchor, and with her gone, I drifted further and further from the girl I used to be. By the time I turned 21, I wasn't a girl anymore. I was a ghost, no friends, no family I could trust, just walls that echoed with secrets and a mother who praised me for knowing my place every time I kept quiet. I tried to run away once. I packed a small bag, took Mama's emergency cash from the pantry, and headed toward the bus stop at dawn. Troy was waiting by the mailbox, like he knew. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. You don't leave, he hissed. Not unless you want things to get worse. For your mama. For you. I believed him. So, I went back, and he smiled like he'd won. The following week, I got sick, really sick. Fever, chills, vomiting. Mama blamed the chicken, but I knew better. Troy had left more than bruises behind. I was pregnant. I kept it a secret for as long as I could. But when the morning sickness became too much to hide, I finally told Mama. She stared at me, eyes wide with something between fear and fury. Is it his? I didn't have to ask who she meant. I nodded. Her hands began to tremble. And then, for the first time in years, I saw something human in her face. Regret, shame, grief, but it was too late. She called a friend from church, a nurse who knew someone who took care of things quietly. And just like that, it was over. No one spoke of it again. Not the child, not the sin, not the shattered girl left behind. I returned to silence, to shadows, to pretending I was whole. But inside, I had died. And I knew, if I didn't find a way out soon, I'd stay buried forever. I was 22 when something inside me snapped. It didn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It came quietly, like the flicker of a flame that refuses to die, no matter how many times it's been stomped out. Troy had just cornered me in the basement again. Same pattern, same threats. But that time, when he left, I didn't cry. I sat there on the cold cement floor, my arms wrapped around my knees, and I looked up at the dusty ceiling like I was searching for something, maybe a voice from Elaine, maybe a whisper from God. And for the first time in years, I whispered back, I'm still here. 3 small words, but they rooted deep. I realized then that he hadn't taken everything. Not yet. I still had my breath, my memory, my will. All I needed now was a way out. So I began to plan. First, I stopped reacting when Troy tried to get a rise out of me. I smiled when he leered, nodded when Mama barked, played the part of the broken, obedient daughter. And behind closed doors, I plotted. I found my old school books and began reading again, late into the night with a flashlight under the covers. I scribbled poems and letters to Elaine, pouring out what years of silence had stuffed inside me like cotton in a wound. But the real turning point came one afternoon at the market. I was picking up cornmeal for Mama when I ran into an old teacher of mine, Miss Clara Jensen. She'd retired the year before, but I recognized her right away. She looked thinner, older, but her eyes still had that gentle spark. "Deborah Allen," she said, tilting her head. "Lord, I hardly recognized you. What are you doing these days?" My mouth opened, then closed. I wanted to say surviving. I wanted to say dying inside. But I smiled instead, just helping Mama at home. She nodded politely, then leaned in. "I always thought you had such a quiet brilliance. You were Elaine's sister, weren't you?" I nodded. Her face softened. "She was special. So are you." And just like that, I burst into tears right there between the peaches and the canned beans. She didn't ask questions. She just took my hand. "Come visit me sometime," she whispered. "I've got books, tea, and time to listen." I did. That Sunday, I lied to Mama and said I had church choir practice. Instead, I walked the 3 miles to Miss Jensen's home. She welcomed me in with warm cinnamon rolls and soft eyes that saw more than I could hide. And I told her everything, every single thing, from Elaine's disappearance to Troy's first assault. From Mama's denial to the pregnancy, I'd never gotten to mourn. When I finished, she didn't speak right away. She just held my hand, her thumb gently brushing over mine like she was trying to wipe the years off. "You didn't deserve any of that," she said finally, "and you sure as hell don't have to keep carrying it." I sobbed for a long time after that, and when I left, she pressed a small envelope into my hand. "Inside's the name of a women's shelter in Tallahassee," she said. "They've helped girls like you. I can drive you if you decide it's time." That envelope lived under my mattress for 3 months. Each night, I touched it like a talisman. Each morning, I whispered to myself, "Soon." The final straw came when Troy slammed my head into the pantry shelf after I refused to cut his sandwich the way he liked it. I saw stars. Blood filled my mouth. Mama didn't even flinch. That night, I packed my things. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, Elaine's photograph. And the envelope, I waited until 3 when the house was quiet. I crept out barefoot, the floorboards cold and familiar beneath my feet. My heart thundered so loud I thought it would wake the dead, but no one stirred. I made it to the road and walked until my legs gave out. Just before sunrise, a car pulled up beside me. It was Miss Jensen. She'd been waiting. I climbed in, and for the first time in my life, I felt the wind against my face and knew it didn't belong to him. It belonged to me, to freedom, to hope. The drive to Tallahassee felt like I was being carried across a bridge between 2 lives, the one I had survived and the one I might finally get to live. Miss Jensen didn't ask many questions on the way. She just played soft music on the radio and kept her hand close to the gear shift like she was ready to grab mine if I needed it. That silence was a gift because for the first time, No one was asking me to explain, to justify, or to smile through the ache. When we pulled up in front of the shelter, I froze. It was a modest house tucked between 2 rows of oaks, with paint peeling slightly on the porch railings and flowers blooming defiantly in every corner of the yard. A hand-painted sign read, "Harbor House." My stomach turned. I thought about turning back, but Miss Jensen turned to me and said gently, "You've already done the hardest part. You left. Now, let them help you heal." A woman named Natalie greeted us at the door. She looked to be in her 40s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She didn't pity me. She didn't treat me like glass. She simply said, "We're glad you're here. Deborah." That was the first time someone said my name and made it feel like a welcome instead of a reminder. Inside. Harbor House was nothing like I expected. It wasn't cold or clinical. It smelled like lavender and cornbread. The walls were painted warm yellows and soft blues. There were bookshelves filled with stories and puzzles halfway finished on every table. And women like me. One was holding a toddler with tear-streaked cheeks. Another sat alone near the window, sketching in a notebook with shaking hands. A third looked up from her knitting and offered a soft smile as I passed. None of them spoke at first, but they saw me, and that was enough. Natalie helped me settle into a small room on the 2nd floor. There was a twin bed with a patchwork quilt, a desk with a journal placed neatly on top, and a window that overlooked the garden. "This is your space," she said. "No one comes in unless you want them to." I cried the first night not from fear, but from the sheer unfamiliar feeling of safety. I wasn't used to locked doors that protected me. Over the next few weeks, I began to learn what healing actually meant. It wasn't fast. It wasn't neat. Sometimes it looked like sitting in silence during group sessions while another woman told her story. Sometimes it looked like crying so hard in the shower that my knees gave out. Other times, it looked like drinking chamomile tea on the porch and remembering I liked the way the wind sounded in trees. They gave me counseling, not just talk therapy, but trauma-focused work. My counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Rachel, helped me piece together what had happened to me, not just the abuse itself, but the lifelong weight of being ignored, invalidated, unseen. "You were conditioned to believe that pain was your duty," she said one afternoon. "But it wasn't. You didn't deserve what was done to you, and you don't owe anyone silence." I carried those words like armor. At Harbor House, I also learned how to exist again. I took cooking shifts. I helped paint the old porch. I read books late into the night and found myself laughing, real belly-deep laughing, for the first time in decades when one of the women taught me how to dance in the rain during a thunderstorm. And then came the letters. I began writing to Elaine. Of course, I didn't know where to send them. She was still missing, her face frozen in time in my only photograph. But I wrote anyway, letter after letter, pouring out years of silence into every page. I told her about Harbor House, about Rachel, about Natalie, about the woman who sketched birds and the teen girl who sang in her sleep. And I told her I missed her, so much that it hurt to breathe some nights. But I also told her this: I think I might survive after all. One morning, Natalie pulled me aside. "There's a GED prep course starting next week at the library. You ever think about finishing school?" The question felt surreal. School me. But something inside me lit up. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I'd like that." So I enrolled. At first, it was terrifying. I hadn't held a pencil in years. I'd forgotten how to study, how to sit still without flinching at every sound. But the librarian was patient, and the other women from Harbor House cheered me on. Bit by bit, I started to believe in a future again, one that was mine, free from Troy, free from Mama's silence, free from the chains of shame and secrets. And every time I sat down at that desk or helped another woman find her voice, I whispered a thank you to Elaine, because without her love, without her laughter from all those years ago, I might never have known what light even looked like. One morning in late October, as I sipped tea by the window of Harbor House, a breeze stirred the pages of my journal and landed them open on one of the letters I had written to Elaine. I stared at her name for a long time, Elaine. Her absence had defined so much of my life, more than I'd ever admitted, even in therapy. I'd carried her like a ghost, always behind me, always just out of reach. And now that I was finally starting to breathe again, to exist outside of survival, a question kept echoing in my heart. What happened to her? I had never dared to ask it aloud. Not to Mama, not to Troy, not even to Miss Jensen. But that morning, I closed my journal, stood up, and walked straight to Natalie's office. I need to find out what happened to my sister, I said. Natalie looked up from her paperwork, eyes full of that steady calm she always had. Are you ready for what you might find? I don't know, I admitted, but I think I'm finally strong enough to ask. She helped me request the missing person report from all those years ago. It wasn't easy. Elaine had disappeared in 1963, and records from small towns like Natchez weren't always digital or complete. But a few phone calls and a little persistence opened a door I hadn't even known was still unlocked. The file was thin, shockingly so. Elaine had been reported missing by a neighbor who noticed she hadn't walked to school that morning. Mama, the file noted, claimed Elaine had run away after a disagreement. There was no evidence of any official search, no flyers, no canvassing, nothing beyond a single statement taken by a deputy who clearly didn't think much of it. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. I felt like I was holding her erasure in my fingers. Later that night, I sat outside under the porch light and cried. Elaine hadn't vanished. She'd been discarded, forgotten by the system, ignored by the one person who should have raised hell to find her mama. The next day, I took the file to Rachel, my counselor. I need to do something. I told her, I need to make sure her story doesn't end like this. Rachel listened. She didn't rush to fix it or offer easy answers, but she said something I've never forgotten. You can't change what happened to Elaine, but you can make sure the silence stops with you. That's when I decided to write a memoir. It started small, just more letters, more memories, shaped into chapters. But once I began, the words poured out like a river that had been dammed for too long. I wrote about Mama's coldness, about Troy's evil, about the quiet courage it took to survive day after day in a house built on secrets. And I wrote about Elaine, her laugh, her pink barrettes, the way she hummed when she braided my hair. She became more than a missing girl in my writing. She became real again. I read parts of my draft aloud during our evening group sessions at the shelter. One woman, who had never spoken before, came up to me after and whispered, "That could have been my sister too." We cried together that night. Elaine's story wasn't just mine. It was every girl who vanished without notice, every sister lost to cruelty, every voice stolen by fear. And through the writing, through the sharing, I began to heal in a way I never had before. One afternoon, while organizing some of the shelter's donation books, I found an old copy of Little Women. Elaine had loved that story we used to act it out in the backyard, her playing Joe and me, the quiet Beth. I took it back to my room, and for the first time in decades, I read it cover to cover. When I reached the final chapter, I held the book to my chest and whispered, "I'm still here, Elaine, and I'm going to make sure they remember you." That promise lit a fire in me. Elaine may have disappeared into the shadows, but I would pull her name into the light. And maybe, just maybe, I could become the voice that I had once needed so desperately. When I finished the first draft of my memoir, I knew it wasn't just for me anymore. I shared a few pages with Natalie and Rachel. Their support gave me the push I needed. Rachel helped me polish it, and Miss Jensen, God bless her, found a small local press in Gainesville willing to take a chance on the manuscript. I titled it The Silence After Elaine. It was raw, painful, and honest. And when it was published, it made a quiet splash in a few advocacy circles for survivors of childhood abuse and disappearance cases. I thought maybe a handful of people would read it. I wasn't ready for what came next. An article in a small Mississippi paper picked it up and ran a story with the headline, "Natchez Woman Reveals Sister's Mysterious Disappearance and Years of Family Abuse." It spread like wildfire through the town I had once called home. The backlash came swift and hard. Mama was still living there, in the same peeling yellow house. The article reached her, and I'm told she denied everything, claimed I made it all up for attention, that I was always the troubled one, that Elaine had run away and brought shame on the family. Even Troy, who I had hoped to never hear from again, somehow managed to get word to me through a mutual acquaintance. "You think they'll believe you now?" "Deborah," he said in a recorded voicemail, "you were always just a sad little girl looking for pity." I shook as I played it. Then I played it again and again until his words lost power, because something else had begun to happen. Too, something quieter but far more powerful. Letters, emails, messages from strangers, women and men alike, saying me too. "I read your book. You told my story. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." One woman sent me a photo of her sister, missing since 1978, and said, "Your words helped me feel less alone." That was the moment I knew I had done the right thing, even if it meant stirring up ghosts in a town that wanted to keep them buried. Still, it wasn't easy. A group from Natchez started posting online, accusing me of dragging a good Christian family through the mud. They said I should be ashamed, that I was ruining people's lives. But you know what? They never once asked about Elaine, never once asked where she went or why her disappearance had been brushed aside so easily. I spoke at a library event in Tallahassee one evening, and after I read from a chapter where I detailed my escape from Troy and Mama's indifference, a woman stood up in the back of the room. She was trembling, but her voice was steady. "I knew your sister. We were in the same choir at Grace Baptist when we were little." My heart nearly stopped. She told me once that her uncle made her uncomfortable. I didn't understand then. I was just a kid. But when she disappeared, I remembered. She came up after the reading and hugged me. We cried. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. I had proof confirmation that Elaine hadn't just been a figment of my grief, that she'd tried, in some small, childlike way, to speak her truth before being silenced. And now, I was giving her that voice back. Through the storm of doubt and denial, I found an unlikely army survivors, advocates, readers who saw their own scars mirrored in mine. They didn't care that I came from a quiet corner of Mississippi. They didn't care that I was old or that my past had nearly broken me. They cared that I stood up, that I said enough, that I survived and told the truth. With their encouragement, I began speaking at shelters, schools, and women's centers. I'd tell my story, then open the floor. Some shared, some cried, some just sat in silence and held each other. But every time, the room held healing. At Harbor House, a new girl arrived, barely 20. Fresh bruises on her arms. I sat with her during lunch, and when she asked if the pain would ever go away, I didn't lie. It won't vanish, I said gently, but it gets lighter when you stop carrying it alone. She reached for my hand. We sat that way for a long time. Elaine was still gone, but she was everywhere now, between my words, in the spaces where truth had finally broken through, and in the eyes of every survivor who told me, "Your story gave me courage." In the years that followed, I found myself doing things I never imagined I'd have the strength or the right to do. I began speaking publicly, not just about my abuse or Elaine's disappearance, but about the systems that fail girls like us. I gave talks at schools in Mississippi, shelters across the South, and even at a university in Atlanta, where a professor had assigned my book to her students in a trauma literature course. It was humbling, surreal. At 71, I thought I'd be living quietly in a little home somewhere, maybe knitting or gardening, maybe watching reruns of Murder, She Wrote, but instead, I was sitting in round tables with community leaders, advocating for stronger protections for children in small towns, places where silence too often covers up crime. I worked with a local nonprofit in Tallahassee to launch Elaine's Light, a mentoring program for girls in foster care and group homes. Many of them had stories not unlike mine, stories full of gaps where people should have listened, where someone should have cared. We matched them with older women, some survivors, some just willing hearts. We hosted poetry nights, art therapy, story circles. I watched these young girls blossom under the attention they had long been denied, and I saw something else too. They reminded me of Elaine and of myself, not the broken parts, but the fierce parts, the flicker of hope, the resistance in their posture when someone tried to silence them. One evening after a group session, a girl named Ania, just 15, barely 5 feet tall, stood up and read a poem she'd written. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. "I'm not what happened to me," she said. "I'm what I choose to become." We all sat in silence. Goosebumps rose on my arms. That night, I walked home under the stars and whispered, "Did you hear that? Elaine, we're still growing." I received a letter not long after from the same county office in Natchez that had once dismissed Elaine's disappearance. A new sheriff, young, earnest, and trying to clean up decades of damage, had reopened several old missing persons cases, including Elaine's. He told me he couldn't promise anything, but he wanted to do right by her, by us. I cried when I read that letter. Even if they never found her remains, someone finally believed she mattered. And sometimes, belief is the first form of justice. My name began to appear in survivor coalitions and newsletters, sometimes even local TV interviews. But I didn't do it for the attention. I did it because every time I spoke Elaine's name, I stole power back from the people who had tried to bury her in silence. I was no longer the frightened girl in the basement or the woman shivering under Troy's shadow. I was Deborah Allen. A survivor, a sister, a storyteller. And through the legacy of what we'd lived and what we'd lost, I was helping build a world where more girls could grow up whole. It's a quiet morning here in Natchez. Yes, I came back, not to live, but to visit. To walk through the town as the woman I am now, no longer the broken child, no longer the silent sister. Just me, Deborah Allen, 73 years old, standing tall with a steady heart. The air smells like magnolia and river silt, the way it always did. But somehow, the fear that once clung to this place doesn't stick to my skin anymore. I've changed. The shadows that once haunted every corner of my childhood can no longer hurt me. I passed by the old house on Cypress Street this morning. It's empty now. The shutters hang crooked, paint peeling like old secrets. Someone scrawled, "Keep out" in red across the porch boards. I stood there for a long while, not to grieve, but to acknowledge what was. This was the house that swallowed me, but it didn't keep me. I stepped away from that porch without bitterness. I didn't need to go inside. Everything worth saving had already come with me when I left my voice, my spirit, my truth. And Elaine, she's been with me every step of this journey, in every young girl I mentored, in every tear I shed during late-night writing sessions, in every time I dared speak her name aloud. She would have been 75 this year. Sometimes. I like to imagine her with silver hair like mine, maybe working at a library, maybe running a small bakery by the river, maybe with children of her own, a laugh still as light as the breeze that once danced through our shared bedroom window. I'll never know what she could have become, but what I do know is this: she was real, she was loved, and her story mattered. Mine does too, so does yours. To anyone listening right now, whether you've lived through something unthinkable or you've carried a burden in silence for years, I want to tell you something. I wish someone had told me when I was just a scared little girl hiding bruises beneath long sleeves. You are not what was done to you. You are not the lies they told, not the shame they handed you, not the silence they expected you to keep. You are worthy of safety. You are worthy of joy. You are worthy of being heard. Healing doesn't follow a straight path. Some days it felt like I was walking barefoot through broken glass. But over time, each step forward strengthened my soul. Each truth I spoke out loud took power away from the ones who tried to control me. Now, as I sit here watching the sun climb over the Mississippi River, I feel something I never thought I'd feel again. Peace. The kind that comes from surviving, from rising, from telling your story even when your voice shakes. If my journey has taught me anything, it's that no one heals alone. We need each other. We need safe spaces, listening hearts, and the courage to face the past so we can build a better future, not just for ourselves, but for the ones who come after us. So I ask you, if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own strength, if you believe that no one's pain should be buried in silence, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, share your truth, or simply say, "I hear you," because sometimes that's all someone needs. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but for her, for Elaine, for every girl whose voice was stolen, for every survivor still learning to live with the light. Because the more we speak, the more we break the silence. And silence is the only thing that ever protected those who hurt us. Let's choose truth. Let's choose healing. Let's choose each other, always.